So it's a pleasure for me to say a few words of introduction to Joaquín Almunia, even if he doesn't need an introduction. But I just want to say a couple of things. One is that he's one of the first persons outside the small group of researchers that we start thinking about ADEMU, before he had the name even, that I countered. Because there was this idea of having an advisory committee, and I asked him, and he said they were always very interested in the project and willing to collaborate, but it is this covenant, okay, this incompatibility of having just been in the commission not that long ago, and a project funded by the commission. So I'm very glad that he can collaborate in any case. The commission doesn't put any constraints on that, but not be formally in any advisory committee or something like this. As you know, Van Rompuy was supposed to be here, but for health reasons at the last moment could not come. So I was very pleased that we already had him in the program. I was supposed to be in the panel, and accepted immediately to do us a favor, which I think is a great favor because we get a very good speaker. Not only is a good speaker, but also certainly I don't know of anyone from Spain, and that will also mean for many other countries, that has this long experience, both at the national, at the European level, of both the economic issues and also the political issues. He started earlier on in the more, he's an economist, he got a degree in economics and advanced degrees in Paris and so on. But he started more in the Socialist Party than on the trade unions, the OGT, as a responsible for the economic affairs there. And then in the 80s was Minister of both Labor and Public Administration. To join later on the Commission, and from 2004 to 2009 as Economic Affairs, and as Vice President of Competition after that. So he has been dealing with all the critical aspects of economic affairs, has been an incredible commissioner, showing a lot of independence from everyone, and criteria both in economic affairs and competition. So it's, without further saying, it's a pleasure to have him. He's someone who's always been very keen and very involved with research and academia and supporting them, and someone who has a lot of judgment. Thanks.
Okay, good morning to everybody, and thank you very much, Ramon. Thank you very much to the ADEMU organizers for allowing me to be here with all of you to listen to many of the panelists and the presentations, and now to intervene in this condition of keynote speaker. When Ramon moved my role here from a panelist on fiscal union to keynote speech or keynote speaker, I was a little bit shocked. What to tell this kind of audience, academic economists, and from my point of view in this conference as a keynote speaker? Well, I thought that can be useful to discuss or to discuss with you my ideas on the politics around the economic and monetary union. As Ramon said, I am a politician, or I was a politician. I don't know what is my condition now after leaving the Commission 1 year ago. But one never go to the retired politician. I continue to have my political mind, but I am a politician, as many of my colleagues in Spain, pro-European. So I have, since many years, a favorable leaning towards more European integration. Here in the UK, I don't know if it's a wise position, but in any case, I will tell you, from my point of view, how I see the political problems right now in the functioning of the economic and monetary union, and how I will, or I wish, to foresee the future of the Economic and Monetary Union with less political restrictions. And I will start by quoting two sentences of the five presidents' report. In this report, in the foreword or in the preamble, there are two sentences that are interesting from the political point of view. First, the five presidents said, the euro is more than just a currency. It's a political and economic project, a political project. And I fully agree with this. I am convinced that if the creation of an economic and monetary union had been discussed in a conference such as this one 40 years ago, the majority would have decided not to launch the project. Only economists will never launch a project such as this one. It was a political project since the beginning. And the second sentence is EMU, the Economic and Monetary Union, is like a house that was built over decades but only partially finished. And this is also a political remark because the politicians that launched the Economic and Monetary Union were very courageous and, in my view, were right, but they didn't pay attention to all the elements that were necessary for the success of the project they launched some decades ago. So the Economic and Monetary Union is a work in process, and a lot of political work has to be done for the success of this project in the future. When this started, you know, the Werner report, late 60s, last century, talked for the first time, if I am not wrong, of an economic and monetary union, because at that time the common market was developing and the volatility of exchange rates, because of the problems of the Bretton Woods systems, required some help from the point of view of the stability of the exchange rate to continue building the common market. In the 70s, the European monetary system was created at the end of the 70s with good support from Helmut Schmidt and Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, because the oil crisis, the first and the second oil crisis, created big turbulences in the functioning of the common market. At the end of the 80s, the Delors report launched more precise ideas on how to build the economic and monetary union, because the single market required support from the point of view of a single currency and the other elements around the single currency. And the Maastricht Treaty, 1992, brought forward the ideas of the Delors report, but also the political strength coming from the political developments in the eastern part of Europe, the end of the communism, the Berlin Wall end, and this required political support, a political union, and not only an economic and monetary union. And finally, in 1999, 10 years after, the Economic and Monetary Union was launched with a core group of 11 countries, and now we are 19. Well, when I was commissioner for economic affairs, we were celebrating the 10th anniversary of the launch of the euro in May 2008. We published a report, EMU at 10. We were not the only ones to publish a report about the first 10 years of the euro area, but in our report was indeed very positive. So we were analyzing what has happened during the first 10 years, and we concluded that this was a very positive experience with many achievements, but also with some clouds. The achievements were clear. Inflation stability, just around the European Central Bank target. The central bank in Frankfurt as a very respected institution, a young but very respected central bank. The exchange rate of the euro above the initial level. The euro was a strong currency, a credible currency, number 2 in the world. And the framework around the Economic and Monetary Union, and in particular the Stability and Growth Pact and the fiscal discipline rules, even if there were some important breaches in 2003, Germany and France, and so on. But all in all, the balance was that a culture of economic policy had changed thanks to the existence of an economic and monetary union in Europe, and that macroeconomic stability that started to be put into question in 2007, but still we were confident that we will manage to tackle the volatility of the markets and the incidents that occurred in 2007. We thought that this macroeconomic stability will continue to be predominant in our area. And we considered that the Economic and Monetary Union helped to this. But we also discovered in this report some clouds. The euro had not a strong influence in the growth rates in the euro area. Our potential growth was quite low at that time. From now, we can see that level of potential growth as impressive, but 10 years before was lower than the one observed in our competitors. And the euro had no significant impact on growth or even on intra-Eurozone trade flows that had not increased as we expected when the euro was launched. There were, in some members of the euro area, excessive public debt levels, Italy and Greece, or Greece and Italy, above 100%, both of them. Belgium, that was the third bad performer in terms of public debt ratio, had made important efforts. Van Rompuy was at the origin of these important efforts of Belgium, and the path of the public debt evolution in Greece, in Belgium at that time was positive, but still high. We observed the clouds about the credibility of the fiscal framework because of the breach of the Stability and Growth Pact that was revised in 2005, but the failure in 2003 affected the credibility of this very important element of the coordination of fiscal policies. But maybe more important was the lack of economic convergence. Some of those who were at the beginning of the Economic and Monetary Union thought that because of the single currency, single monetary policy, the same exchange rate, fiscal discipline framework, the economic convergence will automatically improve. And this was not the result of the first 10 years of the euro area. Competitiveness divergences and lack of corrective mechanisms were one of the features of the picture. And this was worrying, not as worrying as today, that we know the consequences of this from 2008 onwards, but in the first 10 years, this showed some uncertainty regarding how the mechanism was functioning, and in particular, put into question the lack of an economic union. There was no sufficient financial integration, and there were neither prevention nor crisis management instruments in the euro area, and this was a clear failure. It was very difficult to advance before the crisis in the creation of these mechanisms. And of course, there was a weak governance of the Economic and Monetary Union, not only because of the breaches in the Stability and Growth Pact, but also, for instance, because of the lack of a unified external representation of the euro. The ambassador of the euro vis-à-vis the rest of the world was, in most of the occasions, the European Central Bank, and not a political ambassador representing the common view of the governments, of the parliaments, of the countries that were members of the single currency. So with these clouds that were not as strong as to put into question the positive balance of the first decade, Lehman Brothers came and changed the picture, of course. And the EMU was unprepared to tackle this crisis. The initial reactions, 2007, 2009, focused on the repair of the banking system and the fight against the recession. The ECB provided limited liquidity and lowered interest rates. The Commission and the Council, the Eurogroup and the ECOFIN discussed and adopted a EU recovery plan, complying with the Stability and Growth Pact rules, thanks to the flexibility introduced in the revised version of the pact in 2005, but using for the first time in the Economic and Monetary Union fiscal policy in an expansionary way, in a coordinated way to use this tool from the point of view of the fiscal policy in the expansionary way. Many financial institutions, around 25% of the total banking system of the euro area, were subject to bailouts based on national resources. And there were some initiatives to improve the crisis management in the financial sector, the De La Rosière report in 2009, but without substantial changes of the regulatory or supervisory framework that accompanied the Economic and Monetary Union. As everybody knows, at the end of 2009, beginning 2010, the public debt crisis exploded, starting by Greece, and this public debt crisis showed clearly the flaws of the EMU architecture. Some of these flaws were pointed out in the report put forward by the Commission. Not all the flaws, but some of them were pointed out. What were these flaws, in my view? A list of flaws. ECB's mandate was unclear regarding quantitative easing and the responsibilities of the bank as a lender of last resort. This has been discussed during the crisis and not before the crisis exploded. Many decisions that correspond to governments or to the EU institutions had to be improvised, mainly through an intergovernmental decision-making process, the EFSF, ESM, the Deauville Agreement, and so on and so forth. The enforcement of the Stability and Growth Pact rules was not able to correct unsustainable public debt paths. The adjustments requested once the public debt crisis exploded in Greece were excessive and counterproductive, provoking a vicious circle, and this is extremely clear, unfortunately, in Greece, but not only in Greece. And there was a wrong diagnosis, not only of the intense adjustments required on the fiscal side, but there was a wrong diagnosis of the nature of the imbalances, and it's obvious in Ireland and Spain, fueled by the asymmetric impact of the single monetary policy. So those imbalances that were not of the fiscal nature were macroeconomic imbalances, current account deficits, economic divergences in some important indicators, to some extent were endogenous to the system created in the Maastricht Treaty because of the asymmetric effects of the monetary policy in an area with divergent economies. And this was not recognized from the beginning, and this has been a very tough discussion, and we lose a lot of time trying to adjust the diagnosis of the imbalances to the reality that originated those imbalances. Of course, there was a lack of banking union that produced a negative feedback loop between sovereigns and financial institutions because the bailouts were financed with public debt, and the public debt was located in the balance sheets of the banks that, again, started the vicious circle around. And finally, and a very important thing, the Troika system failed and triggered negative economic results, and not only this, triggered deep social problems and negative political consequences. And I can add to this list of flaws or failures some collateral damages, in my view. The ECB was obliged to take on its shoulders too much responsibility. The ECB has been obliged to invade fiscal policy domains, and in my view, is overburdened with new functions, too many functions for a single institution. Second, collateral damage, the need to revise and to reinforce the fiscal discipline framework, the six-pack, the two-pack, the fiscal compact, and so on, produce a too complex framework. Almost nobody understands fully the framework. And to avoid rigidities of this framework, interpretation of the rules are required, and we are now discussing not only the rigidity, the theoretical rigidity of the rules after the different revisions, but we are also discussing how to give a flexible interpretation to a framework that is too rigid. I think it's the worst of the two worlds. So let's see how to solve this. Third, collateral damage, the way to adopt decisions through intergovernmental mechanisms increases tensions between creditors and debtors, between AAA and lower rated countries, between governments, between societies. This is not the good way to adopt decisions in such an original process of putting together national governments and sovereign states. It's a very delicate issue how to combine national sovereignty that still exists in some areas, had not disappeared and will not disappear from one day to another, and at the same time the need to accept that once the decisions are adopted at the common level, at the euro area level or at the EU level, this national sovereignty should be put into question because the representatives of these sovereigns had adopted decisions with the other sovereigns, and these decisions needs to be implemented, needs to be enforced. And finally, another collateral damage, a feeling of failure that creates a political and social pessimism regarding the whole project. So now the 5 presidents report propose 3 goals. It's not the first time that these kind of reports are put forward. In 2012, if I'm not wrong, 4 presidents, at that time the president of the Eurogroup was not associated, produced a blueprint. No, who is the 5th one? The Parliament, yes, of course. Excuse me, Martin Schulz. The Parliament, yeah. So the 4 presidents report and the blueprint produced by the Commission to complement and to go into the details that the presidents had not drafted, now had been followed by the 5 presidents report, in my view, because during these 3 years, another kind of problems had deviated the attention of the presidents and the ministers and the governments, and now more or less the same ideas, in some areas better ideas, had been included in the new report, and hopefully this time the report ideas will be really discussed and negotiated and deepened. So as you know, the President's report proposed 3 main goals: a fully fledged banking union, to ensure adequate transmission of monetary policy, and to avoid negative feedback loop processes, a fiscal union, to create or to make possible an adequate fiscal stance for the euro area, to create shock absorbers and backstops, and to improve the governance on fiscal issues, and an economic union to reduce divergences and provide the right incentives for a sustainable growth path, plus the political union. But how to translate this on political terms, but in other words? In my view, I can distinguish some points that will be developed if the 5 Presidents report is taken seriously by governments and by all the stakeholders. First, we need to recognize the inexistence of an economic union, and that this inexistence of an economic union is at the origin of these increasing economic divergences within euro area national economies. I think this is a key point to better focus the solutions for the future of an economic and monetary union. Second, there are difficulties to absorb shocks if the EMU national economies have not a high degree of convergence. So the asymmetric shocks will increase asymmetric consequences in national economies of the euro area unless the economic union will provide the right instruments and incentives to change the direction of this evolution of national economies. Third, given that one monetary policy produces very different consequences, we need not only incentives, but some mechanisms to correct imbalances. Some of you mentioned the macroeconomic imbalances procedure. Well, we can discuss the picture of the 13 indicators and all these things, but what we should recognize is that until now, this imbalances procedure, or the correction of the imbalances procedure, this mechanism has not been used seriously. And to use seriously this procedure will not require only to send not only messages, but decisions for the correction to those who are on the deficit side of these imbalances, but we need to discuss how to intervene. It's not easy, but we need to discuss how to intervene to correct excessive surplus in the current account. And this, in my view, is a key issue. It's difficult because the number one that will need this correction is the number one, is Germany. And it will not be easy, but it's absolutely necessary to discuss how to do it. Not only how to do it from the political point of view, but also, provided that there is a political decision to correct excessive current account surpluses, how to do it within the economic and monetary union, what are the instruments and what are the incentives to be used. And the second point, in my view, extremely important, is the recognition that we need an instrument to provide the adequate fiscal stance to the euro area. This is recognized in the 5 Presidents report. How to build this mechanism, how to fund this instrument, how to use this instrument, who will decide when, what will be the size and the impact of this mechanism to stabilize the economy of the EMU, of the Economic and Monetary Union, that will not find the adequate policy mix automatically, and will not find the adequate policy mix only using monetary policy. This will require fiscal policy decisions, how to discuss this aggregate stance, building on the fiscal discipline rules, but only the fiscal discipline rules will not give us the result we need. And this is absolutely needed. This will link with a very political discussion, extremely difficult, how to organize risk-sharing channels. And risk sharing can be achieved through public channels or through private sector channels. In my view, the public sector channels today, right now, are politically non-viable. We cannot offer a system that will share risks using only, exclusively, public channels, public money, taxpayers' money. This is not possible at the present level. What are the private sector channels, the financial channels, that will help us to an adequate risk sharing in the economic and monetary union? In my view, this is the other element that is extremely important. Well, there are other points to be mentioned. The question of bail-in versus bail-out. I think bail-in is now advancing positions, and I agree with this. The taxpayers had supported on their shoulders a lot of risks, a lot of efforts, and still, if I am not wrong, something like 5 points of the euro area GDP are channeled on behalf of the taxpayers into the balance sheets of banks in the euro area, and this is an excessive cost that needs to be reduced and, of course, cannot be repeated again if needed. So the bail-in rules are very important and hopefully will be implemented following the directive that was adopted 1.5 years ago. There are other discussions, the more political one around mutualization of risks, but I tend to think that it's better to discuss in terms of risk-sharing channels and not only to discuss mutualization of public debt issuance, because this discussion will not go far away under the present circumstances. We need to discuss and we need to think on how to organize the governance for the discussion between creditors and debtors. This is a very political issue because this links with the, in my view, the key issue. All the other considerations, all the other proposals, all the other initiatives require a much better political integration. The political union cannot be defined, in my view, with one decision or two decisions. Must start with a political awareness that part of the sovereignty should be shared. More sovereignty needs to be shared if we want an economic and monetary union. And it's not an easy discussion. But I come back to the beginning of my speech. This is a political project, and a political project, to be successful, will require to be able to discuss sharing sovereignty. The conditions for mutualization and solidarity needs to be linked with the requirements for responsibility at the level of every one of the member states, and this has not been understood. I don't know if it is a question of the northern model or the southern model. I found from time to time lack of responsibility in the north, and I found from time to time some serious commitments for responsibility in the south. So it's not a northern to southern, it's more the balance between responsibility and mutualization perspectives. And this should be discussed both in the north and the south, east and west, is my view. To be discussing these points, we need to have some clear ideas on governance. And I'm convinced, and it's my experience having participated in the Eurogroup discussions and ECOFIN discussions for 6 years, that to organize an intergovernmental discussion once a month or even twice a month, at the level of ministers, at the level of heads of state and government, under common issues to enforce the rules or to discuss how or who breached the rules is not enough. This will not give us good solutions. It's very important, in my view, at the present juncture, to think how to move from rules to institutions. It's not easy. There are some ideas, the minister of the euro area, to put outside the Commission some functions in a more independent way, so to reduce the politicization of the decisions by the Commission that will help to build consensus among member states. I'm not sure. I think we need to discuss what are the right institutions to adopt decisions in the list of issues where we decided to share sovereignty. If we decide to share sovereignty in some issues, it's better to have one responsible to adopt these decisions than to have all of those who share sovereignty discussing days and nights on who breached the rules and how to react once the rules have been breached. I think institutions are very important, but institutions cannot be the second chapter of the only institutions we have in the Economic and Monetary Union, that is the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank is a particular animal, very important, very efficient, respected, but to adopt decisions on fiscal policy, on economic policy, on the structural reforms, budgets, we need the political institutions, so we need political accountability. And the lack of political accountability now is, I think, one of the biggest failures that we have in our governance system in the Economic and Monetary Union. This requires to think about the Parliament, not to create a new Parliament. Some voices said, well, let's create a Parliament of the Euro area. In 10 years' time, the Euro area will have, I don't know, 23, 24 members, and the Economic and Monetary Union will be almost as big as the European Union. So it's not possible to create again a new parliament. We have one parliament, the European Parliament. I think the European Parliament needs to be a real parliament when it comes to put under democratic control the decisions of the Economic and Monetary Union. This is one thing that governments don't like, but I think citizens and Democrats should support. And the final point, that is a very political one, and I think is one of the big mistakes of the last times in terms of Economic and Monetary Union decisions, is the question of the irreversibility. If we have this political project cannot be a project for 5 years or for a while. If a member state, if a country decides to join the Economic and Monetary Union, this should be a decision forever. And I think it was, I usually tend to understand or try to understand the German arguments. I don't share some of the German arguments in these discussions, but I try to understand why they have these arguments, why they have these positions. I have to recognize that in the last Greek package discussions before the summer, I didn't understood two things. One, I didn't understood the Greek referendum. I cannot explain myself why this referendum took place. Fortunately, the legislative elections have corrected this mistake, and hopefully this will help, the result of the elections will help the good future of the third package for Greece, hopefully. But the other element, I think more serious, is the German position, in particular the Wolfgang Schäuble position regarding the reversibility of the euro area. So to say in a more correct way, to put into question the irreversible character of the Economic and Monetary Union for every member of this union. I think it was a big mistake, and I hope this will not be repeated in the future, because the uncertainties around the reversibility will not only hinder the country that is a candidate to go out, but will hinder the whole project. These are my thoughts and my reflections, not very academic, as you can see, more political. I am optimistic or pessimistic? I am optimistic, because not only in this area of the economic, of the European integration, but in particular in this area, I think the forces pushing in favor of more integration, if you look at those forces every day in the short term, you see the huge difficulties to succeed. But if you have some perspective, you take some perspective to analyze what is the direction of the Union, or the direction of the European Union, or the Economic and Monetary Union, you can be convinced that there is no way to go backwards, that we need to move forward. It's difficult for the technical point of view, and you are here discussing the ways to solve the economic technical difficulties from your academic perspective, and I think it's extremely useful work, the work that you have started here. But the political difficulties are there, but at the end the political difficulties needs always to take into account the counterfactual, the political counterfactual. And it's so obvious that the political counterfactual of a European Union, of the Economic and Monetary Union, is much worse, that politicians at the end, even if we don't have at the present moment big leaders to put forward a vision that will help to understand where we will need to go, but I am optimistic that at the end the political decisions will not only recognize the difficulties to go backwards, but will discover the advantages to go ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Eh? Sí, sí, sí.
We have time for just a couple of questions. We want to finish on time. Around the back, at the back, at the back.
Just a question on a key point that you made, which is the asymmetric adjustment of external imbalances within the EMU. The point is important, but the asymmetry is not just a matter of asymmetric enforcement of the rules. It's also a matter of a natural asymmetry of when you have a need to adjust to a current account surplus or deficit, and this was perfectly explained by someone which here is well known, Keynes, 75 years ago. He spoke about the secular international problem of balance of payment imbalances that throw the main burden of adjustment on the country which is in the debtor position on international balance of payments. So this is a key problem, a key issue that we face in the EMU after the crisis, when we have the need to adjust. Now, what's your opinion about the system which would periodically, so say, compensate for these imbalances? This is, again, similar to the...
Let me show.
To the international clearing union proposed by Keynes at the world level, but okay, that was unfeasible. But at least within the monetary union, this should be, I mean, of course, not sterilizing 100% of imbalances, but for example, the McDougall report in 1977, issued by the Commission, calculated that almost 70% of these imbalances within countries are sterilized, if you want, or compensated through the national budget. Now, a similar procedure within the EMU, would it be feasible?
Well, I don't remember exactly the words that Keynes wrote regarding the ideas, the permanent ideas or the volatility of ideas. He said, more or less, when facts change, the ideas should change. And I think right now, 70-something years after Keynes wrote this sentence, the Economic and Monetary Union had difficulties to adjust in a symmetric way current account imbalances, of course. I said that this is a very difficult issue. But at the same time, the Economic and Monetary Union have instruments, or can have new instruments. Let's discuss. Up to you to discuss what are the best instruments. Have a degree of interdependence among the euro area economies much higher than the one Keynes would have imagined when he wrote this sentence. And it's a mixture, we need a mixture between economic instruments, sensible economic instruments, incentives to let the market play some role, and political decisions based on the feeling that we belong to the same economic and political project. It's a mix. But this economic integration in Europe, monetary and economic integration, financial integration, is a unique case. We need to be creative. We cannot say, well, as the others in other areas of the world, or 50 or 70 years ago, were not able to improve the way these adjustments take place, we will not think about it. In my view, this is a very important issue to think about it and to adopt some decisions with the support, of course, of economists, academic economists, practitioners of the economy, but also with political view.
ADEMU is thinking about that.
This is the reason why I am optimistic. No, not declining. Not the last time.
Well, but also it's weakly connected to domestic politics. These are second-order elections, so that's problem number one. Problem number two, in my view, is much more serious, and that is that the old adage of no taxation without representation, the European Parliament suffers from the reverse, no representation without taxation. In other words, it is not responsible for effectively budgets in any serious way. The EU budget is very small. So unless there's parliamentarisation in the EU combines carefully national and European parliaments, the danger is that an overarching role for the European Parliament would be viewed as illegitimate and weaken the legitimacy within the member states. So it's how you balance the national and the European to make sure that you don't overreach and undermine legitimacy within the member states.
Oh, I fully agree about the particularities, to say in an elegant way, of the European Parliament. But there is a parliament for the whole European citizens. Every one of us can vote. It's a direct election. The turnout last time was slightly better than the previous one. It's true that it's low, but in some national elections it's also low. Maybe in some countries as low as the average of the turnout in the European Parliament elections. In some national democracies in Europe, unfortunately, the turnout is going down. at least in the European Parliament, last elections, this trend has changed, not very dramatically, but has changed. So I will not classify the European Parliament as a second order parliament or second order elections. It's true that the parliament needs to improve a lot, as many other democratic institutions in our countries. Some member states who have a very good democratic institutional framework and the confidence of the citizens in the institutions and in the representatives. In other countries, my own country, Spain, the Spanish citizens showed low confidence in EU institutions, but even lower in national institutions. And we are not the only ones. And we are a democracy. So we have democratic problems. Not only in Europe, we have democratic problems in most of our countries, in most of our societies. When I say that the European Parliament should be much more active in the democratic control of decisions adopted at the European level, EU or Euro area level, I am not saying that the national parliaments should not be associated with this. And there are some national parliaments that are closely associated and very strong. As a commissioner, both when I was in economic affairs or competition even, I visited some national parliaments quite often because I was requested to go there. I visited a lot of times the European Parliament. I visited only once my own parliament in Spain, where I was member for many years, but they don't pay attention to this, national parliament. So we need to improve the way national parliaments at the national level exert democratic control on decisions adopted by their representatives at the EU level, and we need to think how to associate and to improve the links and the connection and the interaction and the exchanges between national parliaments and the European Parliament. But I will never consider the European Parliament as a bad one, because it's absolutely necessary. And I would like very much that in our countries, when it comes to the European elections, the selection of the candidates will be good and not second-order selection of candidates, that it happens in many occasions. And it's extremely difficult without this, without democratic control and politicians that are recognized as representatives of the voters. It's extremely difficult to establish a link between what is being discussed, analyzed at the European Parliament level and the national public opinions. But a couple of days ago, Chancellor Merkel and President Hollande, apart the King of Spain, the same day, were before the European Parliament. And this has been published and communicated throughout Europe. And I think it's a good example on how the European Parliament can improve the way they work.
Just two more questions, we keep them both together. Yes, quick.
This is slight remark just to this, given the lack of legitimacy of the Eurogroup, to say the least, I wonder why it should be so difficult to create a sub-body of the European Parliament only dealing with the Euro area. Could be just a committee or something like this. But my question is just on timing and of the 5 presidents report. I mean, given the experience of the 4th president's report, we had quite a period of intensive reforms, and then suddenly elections were on the table. Germany, France, the European elections, and so on. And now, once again, we have, I mean, the shape, and the timing, the sequencing of reforms is very much influenced by the election schedule that is happening in 2017, and by the British referendum. Yeah? I mean, everybody knows this. Nobody speaks about it. But once again, I mean, how big is the danger that you get again in such a cycling of postponements and yeah.
Well, excuse me. No.
You said the Troika has failed, as Frank meant recently. I wasn't sure in what sense you meant that it has failed. Has it failed in terms of the type of conditionality that the Troika members have imposed and the type of adjustment program? Or has it failed in terms of the ownership, like national governments? Or has it failed in terms of legitimacy, the democratic accountability? That's one part of the question. And the second part, how would you amend it? What do you propose?
Okay. So first of all, I was thinking, for instance, at the European Parliament level in a Euro area committee, specialized in receiving the Euro area responsibles, both at the aggregate level, the president of the Eurogroup, but also national representatives of members of the Euro area to discuss directly with the Parliament, of course, this kind of thing. The future of the 5 presidents report and the debate around their proposals. But we will always have elections, fortunately. We have elections in the 28 member states or in the 19 member states of the Euro area, and we have referenda right now in the next year, probably here in the UK, but maybe in other countries. Well, it's always like that in a democracy or at the national level, the same. What I think was missed for the 4 presidents report and the blueprint put forward by the Commission was that the attention of the responsibles of the Euro area, at the level of the heads, at the level of the ministers, was focused on Greece or the other Cyprus or in 2012 the banking sector in Spain and before Portugal or Ireland. Hopefully, I cross my fingers, they will have more time to dig into the ideas and proposals coming from the 5 presidents report. If I am not wrong, the Commission had the idea, has announced that they will start sending some proposals following the ideas included in the first stage of the 5 presidents report. Hopefully the agenda of the Eurogroup and the agenda of the leaders of the Euro area at the maximum level will allow these discussions and will not be distorted by incidents, crises, or particular situations, hopefully. The Troika. Yeah, I went very, very quickly. Well, some decisions adopted at the Troika level, I think, were completely wrong, but more or less everybody recognizes this in a more explicit or implicit way. The degree of the adjustment in Greece in May 2010 was a failure, collective failure. And we were not able to estimate what will be the consequences of the adjustment that was required. But in other cases, in my view, the Troika system failed because high officials cannot do the job. They have to prepare or they have to follow the political decisions. But the main decisions in this system of how to discuss the conditionality vis-à-vis the member state that required financing and financial support, this is a very, very highly political issue that needs to be personally discussed at the political level, is my view.
The end was the Eurogroup, no?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I've been 6 years in the Eurogroup meetings. I'm not sure if it was always the Eurogroup who discussed this. In any case, be it the Eurogroup or the officials belonging to the Troika, some of them very good friends of mine, by the way, and nothing personal against, I think the outcome in some cases has been good, Ireland or Portugal, the banking sector in Spain, okay. But the results had been seriously affected by the lack of consideration about the social consequences of some of the adjustments, and the mix of this no calculation of social consequences and or the distribution of the efforts and the lack of political ownership at the political level had produced a lack of legitimacy. And this is my point, the lack of legitimacy of this system that requires to be changed. You cannot continue to do the job with a governance that is not considered legitimate by those who need to comply with the decisions, or even by those who need to support the enforcement of the decisions. And this hopefully will change now that we have this third program of Greece signed and hopefully implemented in a wise way. One of the elements to be thought is the way we build up a new governance of the system. I think it's absolutely necessary. Not only from the democratic control point of view, but also from the way decisions are adopted and who is responsible for the decisions adopted.
Well, thanks again. I couldn't think of better lecture or keynote for our kickoff conference. Thank you.
Thank you.